Welcome to Think Smart with TMFG. I'm Mike Connon. I'm here with Senior Financial Advisor Carlo Cansino with the McClelland Financial Group of Assante Capital Management. Behind us, we see this the beautiful Toronto skyline. So it brings us to the
Swimming
topic.
in Lake Ontario, everybody,
it's-
don't worry.
Our topic today is going to be real estate.
Yeah.
I figured it'd be a fitting background to have for the real estate topic and to talk about where it's going. You know, we're in the financial markets, but the real estate markets seem to affect a lot of our clients, you know, almost equally as much as the financial markets in many cases. So we figured we'd do a bit of a touch base on what's been going on. One thing I saw, which was scary, was I was going down my street the other day, and the first time I've seen this in many years, a power of sale sign up.
Right.
And, you know, it was funny. I always thought we'd see them when we went through the high interest rates coming off of COVID and all that. And they seem to avoid those powers of sale. For anyone who doesn't know, powers of sale are basically when people cannot make their mortgage payments and the bank goes and basically forecloses on the property to sell it to get their money out of it. So people like it when they're buying because it's usually a discounted sale because they want it sold pretty quickly because the bank doesn't want to hold that type of inventory. But that brings us to the topic of what's going on. So we did a little bit of research. In addition to that, on my street, I have a small street. There's about 20 houses on it.
Right.
3 of them went up for sale in the last 2 weeks, which was a bit shocking. I haven't seen anything for sale in there in the last year, and all of a sudden 3 are for sale. The funny thing was the 3 that were for sale were new builds.
Right.
So I don't know this for sure, but my imagination starts to figure out what happened in here because they've only been built for about 3 years. Why are all of a sudden they going for sale? And, you know, what would be your assumptions in there?
Well, what I would assume is these developers would come in, buy these properties, build these new beautiful homes, but not necessarily have the financing to be able to maintain it, given the rise in interest rates that we've just seen since post-COVID.
Yeah, interest rates they've settled. They're not as big of a subject right now because they seem to be around the 5% range, somewhere around
Right.
there for your average person. We saw them get up to that 7%, and we were getting really worried. They've come down a bit, which is okay. But a lot of times when these people were building these properties, they were dealing with 2% interest rates.
Right. And effectively, those rates have doubled.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you're thinking you've got slim margins on what you're going to be earning in terms of an income and your borrowing rates have effectively doubled, that doesn't leave you in a very good cash flow position.
And I think what happened with these people is they had put the money into the account. So let's say they had a total build cost of $2.5 million, and all of a sudden they were planning on making some money, and they weren't going for $2.5 million, and all of a sudden the carrying costs were very high, and they figured, okay, let me just struggle this out. We'll get through this high carrying cost until eventually the market picks up, and then we can sell it and make a profit on it. And all of a sudden, interest rates haven't come down as quickly as they thought, and the markets tend to be trending downward. Which is meaning people were basically having to cut bait on this and having to go and get their money out and take the loss, or at least stop the losses from continuing. Other thing I did was I met with a lawyer last week. There's a real estate lawyer, and we were just discussing businesses. And I said, you know, we always talk, how have you been? You've been busy.
Right.
I said, how have you been? He says, yeah, we've been pretty busy too. It's actually the most busy we've been in a long time. I said, well, why is that? There doesn't seem to be a lot of real estate going along. He said, well, nothing's closing. He says, every time I have a deal come in, it's a condo and it's supposed to close, and the buyer can't get financing. And they go into their bank because they bought a condo on spec, let's say 3 or 4 years ago. They bought it for $1 million, so they settled on their price to buy that condo. And now when it's coming to have to do the actual purchase and put the money down for the condo, the bank is going to say that condo's not worth $1 million; it's worth $700,000. So we'll loan you, let's say, 80%. So we're going to give you, you know, $560,000. We're not going to give you the the let's say $700,000 they planned on, or $800,000 they planned on getting before.
Pretty difficult for somebody to come up with an additional $140,000 for that down payment to close.
Yeah, so it's causing a lot of problems on the real estate market. Right now, the builders have not been given in. The builders are trying to hold to their price.
Right.
But eventually what happens is the builders eventually have to go and start to lower the prices. It was funny, when I was a kid, I grew up back in the 70s and early 80s. Behind my house, there was this building it was an abandoned building, all the kids would play in.
Sure.
So I remember because all the rebars were coming through the concrete, and we'd go down and sneak down there at nights, and it was our place to hang out. It was this huge apartment building that got started and just stopped halfway. And it was there for 20 years. Nothing ever happened to it. Eventually, they had to tear it down because it got so old and so rusty and undone that it had to be torn down and rebuilt again.
Right.
But you can see from that where people can put a lot of money into things and have to eventually pull out.
Walk away and just cut their losses.
Other question I have a lot of times from clients is how to sell houses on this market. And it's nice and easy to sell a house when markets are going up. And so it's a very easy thing. You put your house for sale. Real estate agents were now in a situation where they would list it and they'd have multiple bidders, and you'd get more than you listed it for. It was a really easy thing for the last decade to sell a house.
Right.
You didn't have to do much. You just had to go and call your real estate agent, and it seemed like within 3 days your house was sold.
Well, that was it. You had multiple offers and just bidding up the price of these properties. And these real estate agents, like you said, would have to put in work, but essentially they knew that as soon as they had a listing, this was a guaranteed close. But now we're not seeing that any longer.
No, I had the stats written down.
Right.
And essentially right now, houses are spending over 4 months on the marketplace. Last time it was this high was basically during COVID when people weren't allowed to leave their house.
Right.
So it's a long time. It's been, at one time when we go back, if we go back in time, it was 2 months on the marketplace. Now it's 4.5 months to 5 months. So that's continued to become longer. The other thing we're seeing is the amount of houses that close have dropped drastically. So we've seen a big fall in that. The listings have actually gone up quite a bit. So it's not that people aren't listing houses, they're just not selling. So they're staying on the marketplace. In addition to that, we've seen a fall from January 2022 of about 15% in the price of a house. So when we look at all these different things together, it's funny, these different charts paint a picture of something that's going on in the housing market. I know we don't hear a lot about it, but there seems to be a bit of a story going on there. The thing I do find is when you're in these fallen housing prices, the mistake that people make is they chase the price down. So what I mean by that is they always think of what their house was worth rather than what it is worth.
Right.
And this is the big problem we run into. If you had a house for, let's say, $800,000, you thought it was worth, I guess a year ago, it's hard to accept that it's only worth $700,000 now.
Right.
So what they do is they say, well, I want to sell this house, but I know they've gone down, but it was worth $800. You told me it's worth $700, put it at $750. And they put it in $750, right? Then all of a sudden nothing happens at $750, and then the price goes down to be worth, let's say, $650. And they go, okay, that's bad, but I'll drop my price. I'll go down to $700. And they follow the price all the way down because they're unwilling to accept that the price of the house has changed.
Right.
And they always want someone to pay what it was worth 3 months ago or 6 months ago. And the problem is they never have a sale happen. And this can go on for years. The housing market tends to be a much longer cycle. Right. Than the stock cycle. We go through ups and downs in the stock market, obviously, but it's a pretty quick, it's pretty quick up and down. Sometimes we have extended cycles, but real estate cycles tend to be very long. Paul, when was the last time you've seen housing markets change or go down?
Well, I recall back when my family moved into our current home, it was right before prices started taking off. And this was back March of 2020, right in the heat of COVID. And prices weren't jumping. We were able actually to get into this house at a relatively good price. But as soon as that happened, prices started shooting up because we found that there was, as rates were dropping, more and more people were entering the market to try to buy real estate.
Yeah. COVID was a weird time because there was just no one shopping, right? Because it was, you couldn't go and view houses. No one went anywhere in their homes. So it was a bit of an opportunity. And you were lucky because you got a house that was close to your last house. So it was almost your neighbor was selling it.
Exactly.
Which was good. But that's what people run into when they're trying to sell houses. And it becomes a big issue, particularly with people that need to get rid of it for financial reasons.
Right.
So again, what people have to do is really accept what the housing market is at. And whatever that is at today is what your house is worth. And the cost of holding on to a house is expensive. You got maintenance and if you still have a mortgage, you're paying the interest costs, you're paying your taxes, you're paying your maintenance. As things go wrong, you're going to fix things in the house. So there's a lot to do. If you take a look at Canada, we've been on a very long cycle. The last correction was back in 1990.
Yep.
And I think we're in 2025.
Right.
So
35 years.
35 years before our last housing correction. And back in 1990, it was a full decade before it started to recover.
Right.
So it was a long type of correction. The U.S. saw a big correction in 2008 when they went through the mortgage crisis. Canada did a great job at that time, we had a bit of it, but we averted the big disaster that we saw happen in the U.S. So we didn't get that smack on the wrist to teach us a lesson along the way. And we continue to let the prices grow.
Yeah, and you know what? I think about that time, and banks in Canada, they're far more heavily regulated than the U.S. banks, and because of those high regulations, we weren't as hit hard because the deals that we were being underwritten. They were actually good deals, and they weren't bad mortgages. We weren't offering the ninja type mortgages, the no income, no job type applications. And our banks were able to weather the storm. And the real estate market we saw, I think we were able to take advantage of that. We saw the dollar was at par at that time.
Yeah.
And real estate prices were dropping tremendously. So there was opportunity for Canadians to be scooping up some real estate in the U.S. market because it was the best of both worlds. It was a perfect storm. It was dollar at par and low prices.
Unique buying opportunity.
Yeah.
It's funny when you get into the leverage idea. We always talk about leverage. Leverage is a great thing on the upside because it really multiplies your gains.
Yep.
But everyone forgets on the downside. It's exactly the opposite effect, and that's where we're seeing the real effect. People who've leveraged. If you don't have any mortgage on your property or anything and you don't need to sell it, what difference does it make?
Right.
I always tell clients this when they come in and they put their home value down. Some people get very detailed on how much their home is worth. They want to have the exact value. For us on a financial planning side of things, it really doesn't matter that much. That's the last resort is to sell the home. It's not creating cash flow. It's not really affecting anything. It's just that total net worth statement that it affects. But your lifestyle doesn't change that much based on the value of your home, right?
No, exactly. You're not sure of what the actual value of your home is until somebody's willing to put an offer on paper. So oftentimes in a financial plan, I'll ask clients what they think their house is worth, and they'll have an idea. They'll hum and haw about what's gone up in their neighborhood. But in reality, it's what would be the least amount that you'd be willing to take if you were going to be selling your home.
It's funny, clients have been very realistic in the last 6 months, I find. People are making all adjustments down on their property.
Right.
Every time I do a financial plan update, everyone says, well, it's not really worth that anymore because we update every year and they know things have changed around a bit.
No, it's funny you say that. In the most recent financial plan updates I've been doing, in our planning, the value of real estate goes up at the rate of inflation. And so they'll see a number on their plan and kind of sheepishly have to make that value a little bit less just to be a little bit more realistic.
Yeah, because the reality, when everything was going up, everyone was exaggerating the values a bit.
Exactly.
So they thought it would be worth that. And,
exactly.
We had to make some adjustments. The other thing, too, is the banks, when no one needs the money, are very push forward to give a lot of money and create a lot of loans and leverage. When you're in a situation where people need money, the banks become very tight.
Yep.
And that's what we're finding now, too. The mortgages, all the qualifications, everything that are coming off the, let's say, tier one banks has become tremendously tight for anyone to do any financing. We don't want to see the situation where the banks foreclose on places because that creates, it's almost like a snowball effect.
Right.
The problem is once that starts, once they start to foreclose on houses, the housing prices start to go down because there's more houses on the market.
Right.
More houses on the market and more prices down means more people are going to have trouble financing because there won't be enough value in the house to refinance. So it's a snowball effect once that goes. So I'm hoping that one power of sale sign I saw doesn't continue to grow because it's not good for anyone.
Yeah.
And we want to make sure that the economy does well, and the housing market is a big part of that economy too.
No, you're right. The banks don't want to carry their physical real estate like you were saying. They're willing to take 50 cents, 75 cents on the dollar with the real estate. So they're a little bit more rigid when it comes to providing loans, providing mortgages, because they don't want to be put in that position where if the borrower can't pay it back, well, now the bank owns the property
Yeah.
But what are we doing with this property? Let's unload it. So better to cut it off at the source and look for better borrowers.
Yeah, we'll see what happens with interest rates. They've seemed pretty stable for
Yeah.
the last period of time. You know, we keep on getting the push from down south saying to lower interest rates, but that's a bit of a battle going down south. And yeah, I can't see Canada doing much until the U.S. starts to do much, because really you create some currency issues if you do. So
Yeah.
we'll see what happens. Well, that brings us to another episode of Think Smart with TMFG. Thank you very much and have a great day.